Epic fail. I was taken in by Jordan Peterson. Boy, did I ever think he was the greatest. I made lots and lots of excerpts of his videos. I idolized him really as some kind of amazing genius. And when people that I respected, like Vox Day, said he was a charlatan and a con man, I said, no way, my hero Jordan, he is great. Yes, he might be a little scattered, but he's okay. Well, now the latest news has come out, and I'm embarrassed. I'm going to quote you. I read some of Vox's blog posts to make videos of them, and there's a great dark stream that he did yesterday about Jordan Peterson that I'll link in the description. So I just wanted you to know I'm embarrassed, and I think there was some good stuff that Jordan had to say, but overall, he's not my mentor. So here's a blog post about the reveal from Michaela Peterson from yesterday.
A narrow escape. Fortunately for humanity, its greatest thinker has survived to think more of the thoughts that no one has thought before. Michaela Peterson explains the recent silence of Jordan Peterson. The last year has been extremely difficult for our family. Dad was put on a low dose of benzodiazepine a few years ago for anxiety, following an extremely severe autoimmune reaction to food. He took the medication as prescribed. Last April, when my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer, the dose of medication was increased. It became apparent that he was suffering from both a physical dependency and a paradoxical reaction to the medication. A paradoxical reaction means the drugs do the opposite of what they're supposed to. These reactions are rare but not unheard of. For the last 8 months, he's been in unbearable discomfort from this drug, made worse when trying to remove it, because the addition of withdrawal symptoms stemming from physical dependence. He experienced terrible akathisia, which is a condition where the person feels an incredible, endless, irresistible restlessness, bordering on panic, and an inability to sit still. The reaction made him suicidal. After several failed treatment attempts in North American hospitals, including attempts at tapering and microtapering, we had to seek an emergency medical benzodiazepine detox, which we were only able to find in Russia. It was incredibly grueling, and was further complicated by severe pneumonia, which we've been told he developed in one of the previous hospitals. He's had to spend 4 weeks in the ICU in terrible shape, but with the help of some extremely competent and courageous doctors, he survived. The decision to bring him to Russia was made in extreme desperation, when we couldn't find any better option. The uncertainty around his recovery has been one of the most difficult and scary experiences we've ever had. So, finally, Dad is on the mend, even though there's a lot of physiological damage that he needs to recover from. He's improving and is off the horrible medication. His sense of humor is back. He's smiling again for the first time in months, but he still has a long way to go to recover fully. It's more than a little strange, is it not, that a complete stranger could coincidentally happen to anticipate an emotional crisis of this magnitude prior to its occurrence? But setting aside the various possible causes of the crises, let us simply observe that perhaps one would be, shall we say, unwise to live one's life according to the philosophy and precepts of a man who is clearly unwell on multiple levels, including the physical, psychological, and the spiritual.
Here's the post that inspired me to make these couple of videos here today, where one of Vox's commenters is making a case that we should be given a pass for getting it wrong about Peterson because we were taken in by a very high-powered sociopath.
No, you should all be ashamed. Avalanche insists that no one should feel ashamed for being taken in by Jordan Peterson. I very much disagree. Quote, I am ashamed for liking Jordan Peterson, close quote. Every semi-normal person feels this way after having been taken in for a destructive ride by a sociopath. How could I have been so blind not to see him for what he was? I cannot ever trust myself again. But there is no shame in being used by a master user. That would be like saying, I've just learned to play golf, but Jack Nicklaus just destroyed me on the links. It's because there must be something wrong with me. No, you were just way outclassed. Old Geordie is a probably literally insanely talented master at sociopathic manipulation of normal folks. Raises a rueful hand. He sure got me. Sociopaths are not normal, and normal people have no useful defenses against the first one they meet, and often not further ones if they're unfortunate enough to run into another. Whenever you get down on yourself for not seeing it, remind yourself that you had a run-in with a tiger on the veldt and got away with a mere financial scratch. Good for you. The problem is that I told everyone what Jordan Peterson was the moment I started paying any attention to him. I saw through his act at first glance and immediately observed several points of evidence that strongly indicated he had a disordered mind and a deceptive character. Yet 4 out of 5 people who had followed me for years reacted angrily and insisted that I had to be wrong, despite the fact that there was absolutely zero evidence to support their position. And by zero evidence, I mean none whatsoever. Even the most cursory reading of anything he had ever written, dating all the way back to college, was sufficient to cast doubt on the man. It was one of the strangest things I've observed in the history of the blog. There is no intellectual defense for that kind of reaction. This is precisely why I say MPAI. Most people are idiots, by which I mean that they are primarily driven by what makes them feel good at the moment, which is another way to say that they are predominantly ruled by rhetoric. That is just as true of Avalanche and the majority of people here, albeit a smaller majority than the norm, as it is of society in general. An idiot, to me, is anyone who believes, contra all philosophy, science, and history, that the truth of the matter is, or even can be, determined on the basis of his feelings about it. Even when Protagoras says, quote, man is the measure of all things, close quote, he is not referring to any one individual man, much less that man's feelings at a particular point in the space-time continuum. These things are what they are, but don't say there is no shame in them. It's not for the rhetorical to judge or absolve the rhetorical. It is for those who are less susceptible to rhetoric to judge them. There were massive quantities of evidence indicating that Jordan Peterson was a fraud, and yet very, very few of his fans placed any weight on any of that preponderance of evidence, simply because he made them feel good for one reason or another. If you fell for Peterson, then you should be ashamed, and you should admit it to yourself. You should explore the reasons why you did so, and why you were susceptible to his con.
and you should do so in order to prevent yourself from falling just as readily for the very next fraud to come along. In fact, I would even suggest that the desire to explain away one's feeling of shame is indicative of the very vulnerability that led to the feeling in the first place. If human history is any guide, many of those who fell for Jordan Peterson will fall for the next person to make them feel similarly good about themselves. Because most people are idiots. In my own case, I should have known better. I saw years ago when he wouldn't address the question about Solzhenitsyn's 200 years together, when he refused to speak to that, I should have known that he had priorities higher than the truth.